In late June of 2023, 6 influencers boarded a flight that would take them to the brand trip destination of their dreams. They posted content featuring private airport lounges, luxurious business class amenities, and lavish hotel rooms. But what they didn't know is that while they were posting their glamorous travels, they were also simultaneously stirring up the scandal of a century. Not really. Everyone moved on to a new topic within 3 days. But in this video, these 6 influencers will remain nameless in our quest to prioritize tools over targets. I want you to see the forest for the trees and apply what you've learned today to broader topics, not just vigilante justice. As such, I'll be giving you a slew of copyright-free names for our martyred influencers. Catman, Commander America, Feline Woman, Nurse Strange, Ultra Girl, and Deborah, otherwise known as the Revengers. Hey, only 2 of those characters are Avenger knockoffs. Anyways, I'll try my best to cover everything, but there is so much complexity to the story that simply can't be covered in a digestible YouTube essay. If I leave anything out, please add it in the comments below. Today's story has it all. Murder, betrayal, coveted affairs, and lots of Reddit-level discourse. Agony. That's how I'd describe it. Agony and fear. In all of my 24 years as a private eye, I hadn't seen anything like it. The murder had occurred on one of those bleak nights where the sky was indiscernible from a pot of ebony ink. I put my all into solving this case, yet the deeper I dug, the more evil was unsurfaced. It's a dangerous lifestyle, detective work. One wrong move and your whole life goes kaput. Or worse, it goes on the internet. You need protection out here. You need a VPN. Today's Noiric Mystery is sponsored by Surfshark. Surfshark is a virtual private network that keeps what you do online your business. It's fast, easy to use, and can run on unlimited devices. If you're prone to working on public Wi-Fi, like ones provided at coffee shops or restaurants, your online data is vulnerable. And detectives can't be caught slipping like that, baby. This is sensitive information. Surfshark is perfect for this predicament. Their military-grade encryption basically blurs your data from prying eyes. And don't worry, not even Surfshark collects your data. Like I said, your business is your business. When you get tired of all that detective work and want to take a media break, Surfshark comes in handy too. There was a very important documentary about Shein that I wanted to watch for this video. It contained literally the bulk of my research, but it's only available in the UK. I can easily change my server to that location and bam, I have full access to the documentary. You mean you didn't have to watch the whole 40-minute documentary split into 18 different parts on TikTok? Man, I need Surfshark. Surfshark is kindly offering an exclusive deal for you, my subscribers. You can enter promo code SHANSPEAR for an extra 3 months free at the link in my description. That's SHANSPEAR for an extra 3 months free at the link in my description. Thank you to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to our investigation. Inspecting our evidence, let's go in order of interesting to outright damning. Firstly, all of the creators invited on this luxe trip are considered micro to mid-size influencers. Ultra Girl represents an impressive base of 4 million on her TikTok and 1 million on her YouTube. But most of the others run relatively small accounts. Small in terms of influencer marketing. An audience of double to triple digit thousands is a lot of people, and I'm sick of pretending it's not. You guys are like a small army. The responsibility is almost too much, but still I serve.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Not only are most of these creators small or mid-size, but every single one of them are people with marginalized identities. 5 out of 6 of the creators are women of color, either Black or Mexican. and one of the creators is plus sized. These tidbits are interesting to me because I can see myself more in these creators than in creators like Mr. Beast.
We are now stranded on a raft in the middle of the ocean. And there goes our boat. We are now stranded for 7 days.
And then his thumbnails are so specific. Every single video, he's like,
I feel like it's funny when YouTubers do that. It's like, what's so like serious? Why are we?
And because of that, I can also see potential motives or perhaps excuses behind their actions. For starters, creators of color are often sidelined when it comes to sponsors and brand deals. Just look up any of Dote's scandals or even allegedly Tarte. This kind of shunning leads, in my opinion, to a scarcity / overly grateful mindset. You're supposed to be happy getting anything, even if those things are mere scraps compared to your more pampered counterparts. A second reason why their demographics are so interesting to me is because of the relationship between people of color, especially women of color, and wages. And forgive me, oh my god, the next few minutes are going to be irony central, okay? It's going to be very ironic in terms of the main conversation, but stick with me. In the general workforce, wages are distributed differently depending on who is receiving them. For much of our history, white, non-Hispanic men have generally dominated the job industry, though it's important to note the complexities that arise over time. For instance, studies show that Asian people out-earn white men by a small margin, but this data doesn't include the rich diversity of the AAPI community, nor does it take into consideration economic gaps and fluctuations within that diverse community. You can read this source to learn more. Focusing on general data, for every dollar that a white man makes, a black woman makes just 64 cents. Hispanic women face an even larger gap, making 57 cents for every dollar a white man makes. These numbers get more convoluted and nuanced the more you travel along racial and labor lines, but for the most part, women of color usually bear the brunt of lower wages than their white male or white in general counterparts. For plus-size women, it's much of the same. Some researchers have written about what they call the weight penalty, wherein the more a woman weighs, especially in comparison to her age, the less she gets paid in the general workforce. The National Institute of Health reported that plus-size women aged 51 to 61 were paid 40% less than their skinnier peers, and the number only grew as they got older. In the influencing world, these gaps in pay do not change. In 2021, MSL released a report about the influencer pay disparity and found that the pay gap between white influencers and influencers of color was 29%. Looking specifically at black influencers, the gap widened to 35%. Of course, you have to consider demographics and engagement when it comes to influencer pay disparity, as well as, I guess, education and job industry for the general workforce. However, in my opinion, as well as in the opinion of much more qualified researchers, identity does play a role in how marginalized people get paid. So how do our current culprits, the Revengers, fit into all of this word vomit? Well, they just so happen to be from the very demographics of underpaid, under-spotlighted communities. From their videos, I can feel it. The excitement of finally being seen and apparently appreciated in their industry. What looks like selling out their audience or taking an egregious brand deal to us could have been an eagerness to be included for them.
Okay, so this is my first ever brand trip, which is like kind of ridiculous because I've been in this industry for 5 years and I could focus on that, but I'm not going to because I deserve this shit. So I'm going to bask in my glory all week long and take up all the space.
In the creator economy, where brands and clout are the top resources, most people don't second guess how or from who they're receiving attention.
Also, most influencers are young people who are experiencing an industry that didn't really exist yesterday and could very well obliterate and to turn into dust tomorrow. There's no handbook, no one's really looking out for you, and you're taught directly or indirectly that you have to create this brand image and maintain this image, and oftentimes it's an image of consumerist capitalist girl boss fiery hell that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. I think the influencer market is designed to suck people into a mentality of selfishness, blissful ignorance, and glamour. And I think it's designed to reflect the worst parts of capitalism. And of course, we blame people for succumbing to this lifestyle. And to a degree, it is their responsibility to not turn into someone who posts aesthetic shots of a climate crisis. But our societal expectations, in my opinion, create a cult-like environment that anyone can fall victim to, not just influencers. We don't see regular people make these poor choices because we don't have cameras on these people. And I speak here not from judgment, but from experience. And it's also not my prerogative to play devil's advocate here. I just really think that this conversation needs not sympathy per se, but just a softer look at why people do the things they do in an industry that is designed to get people to make these choices.
The issue is, this is merely a possible explanation and definitely not an excuse. Even worse, this explanation becomes much harder to sympathize with when you uncover the reality of what brand the Revengers were aligning themselves with in the name of being seen.
I am in China on a brand trip with Shein, so let's do a little room tour.
Day 3 here in China with Shein.
Get ready with me to go on a brand trip with Shein.
Shein. Public enemy number... Fuck, I'm running out of space on this list. Shein is a multi-billion-dollar company that specializes in cheap, relatively quick items shipped right to your door. That sounds like an ad. It's not. Even that word salad is somehow an understatement. NPR called it a global retail behemoth. It revitalized how brands operate and market their businesses and how consumers purchase goods, especially fast fashion. Variations of Shein have existed since 2008, when its elusive CEO, Chris Xu, founded it first as Zico, then Shein Side, and finally Shein in 2015. Over the years, it has managed to outdo large names like Zara in terms of sales, and Nike in terms of Google search volume. Because its CEO, Chris Xu, is so private, the company lacks a clear face. Twitter and 48 other failed companies have Elon Musk, Amazon has Baldy Bezos, and Facebook has a human man, I promise. But Shein is relatively polymorphous. Instead of the CEO, we think of its various consumers whenever we contemplate the brand. These consumers are sometimes young, oftentimes marginalized, and predominantly women. Interestingly enough, these are the exact demographic makeup of its June brand trip. Some people have argued that Shein knowingly exploited these influencers by preying on their desires to be included as marginalized creators. However, I also think it's a possibility that Shein invited people who relate most to their target audience in order to maximize profits. If you're watching an ad and you see people who you can relate to, even on the most basic levels, you're most likely to listen to them and to buy their products. What if they're selling you a vision of a brand that isn't true? The reason everyone is up in arms about this brand trip is because despite its global domination, Shein is a heavily criticized, extensively documented company. Over the past decade, Shein has been accused of infringing upon artist copyright, underpaying, exploiting, and abusing workers, using forced labor in some of its supply factories, and putting our planet on a fast track to ultimate climate catastrophe.
They also did this, so jail.
Girl, it's that bad. Naturally, when the videos from those 6 influencers began trickling into TikTok and Twitter, people were incensed. Not only because the brand itself is so horrible, but because the brand trip produced what some people are calling, and I don't know if I agree with this, but some people are calling it propaganda levels of content.
Shein hosted an influencers trip at their factory in China, and it's the biggest load of propaganda crap.
Instead of lounging poolside at festivals or cavorting around Bali, Shein enlisted its creators to tour its Innovation Center. These creators would be able to get first-hand insights into how Shein's products are designed, manufactured, and shipped. Influencers walked around and noted the bright, safe environment of the factory. Workers were smiling, packages were clear and tidy. Most of the work even seemed to be carried out by efficient, fast machines, according to Ultra Girl.
And honestly, everybody was just working like normal, like chill, sitting down. They weren't even sweating. We were the ones sweating walking through the whole facility.
Yup.
They weren't even sweating, used as a statement about a company accused of running sweatshops, is wildly inappropriate. First, it's crazy if you want to get academic about it. Once the backlash became saturated, some of the influencers began pushing back just as hard. Ultra Girl called netizens xenophobic and racist for assuming that the Chinese-based company was abusing its workers.
This was a highly controversial take, by the way, but it's not coming just out of thin air. When discussing this brand trip, I've seen a few people imply that all Chinese-based production is done in poor working conditions, and even others still implying that anything made outside of the United States is made with forced labor or made in sweatshops. Unfortunately, there are sweatshops in the United States, and garment workers are highly vulnerable to exploitation even here.
Feline Woman, a plus-size influencer, noted that people like her are usually underpaid and underrepresented by brands, and thus Shein was one of few who treated her well. Commander America even chimed in and said that she joined the trip because she wanted to show the general public what Shein looked like through her eyes. "Why can't I say this is my truth and my experience in working with this company?" she asked. "This is from my own two eyes. This is what I see, and this is my experience. My own eyes did not see what everyone else is talking about." So what is it that everyone else is seeing when it comes to Shein that these influencers unfortunately simply are not? While it is true that the innovation center they were taken to does look very clean, safe, and not sweat-inducing, the same cannot be said for Shein's other supply factories. For a really long time, this information can only be spread by word of mouth, as Shein is generally disapproving of cameras. I should say allegedly. Shein is allegedly disapproving of cameras or investigative journalists in their supply chain. But in 2022, Iman Amrani pulled off the unthinkable. Alongside her team, she infiltrated 2 Shein production factories using hidden cameras. In fact, her documentary, Inside the Shein Machine, is the first time ever that hidden cameras were taken inside the brand's supply chain. Amrani and her team utilized the help of 2 undercover journalists, both of them unidentified for their own safety. And what they found out was horrific. Why did I write this like it was a fucking true crime script? Allegedly, according to the documentary, workers at least one supply factory had no regulated work hours. They were considered done working when they finished their minimum production of 500 garments per day. Workers allegedly reported they have a maximum of 1 day off per month, with at least one factory worker stating, I think at a second factory, that they work daily with no off days at all. Despite Chinese labor laws and Shein's own labor rules stating that workers must not work more than 8 hours a day, or an average of 44 hours per week, Amrani's undercover journalist revealed that Shein factory workers at least one location allegedly worked up to 18 hours a day. And this wasn't just a one-time occurrence. The footage that the journalist captured implied that it was rather normal for workers to clock in early morning and clock out well into midnight, even sometimes around 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. During these long shifts, workers were allegedly expected to create 500 garments at minimum. If they made a mistake, such as failing to trim off any extra thread, money would be deducted from their already unlivable wage. Allegedly. One infiltrated factory claimed to only pay its workers 2 cents per garment as commission. And forgive me, girl, I didn't perform above a B in any of my math classes, but it seemed like the workers were saying that they had to complete their minimum of 500 garments every single day in order to get their monthly paycheck, which would be 4,000 won or $500 US. If I'm not mistaken, they could also then, on top of that, receive a commission of 2 cents per garment after, but I've also seen a lot of sources state that these 2 cents are what the workers are paid, period.
Workers employed directly by this factory receive a base salary plus commission on the amount of garments they complete each day.
Either way, the payment these workers are allegedly receiving is dangerously low, especially for the amount of hours they have to put in just to receive it. Ever the Shakespearean researcher, I did a basic unverified search of the cost of living in Guangzhou, where Amrani did her undercover work. And depending on where you live, rent can cost anywhere between 4,000 to 7,000 won, which would be 500 to 1,000 US dollars. Sorry, there's a gnat. Considering some workers receive a base salary of 4,000 won a month to work exorbitant hours? God damn. Especially when you consider that some garment workers receive even less than that due to low base pay or because of deductions. Amrani's documentary also concluded that workers were allegedly not allowed to go visit family outside of the area lest they get fired, and they're not allowed to call off from work. Some workers have even testified that they wash their hair in the sinks at work during their lunch break because they just don't have enough time when they go home to do basic self-care. One factory featured in the documentary did provide housing for its workers, but according to one worker, it was allegedly very hard to live in. The conditions were really bad. There was no hot water. I took a cold shower for 2 nights. God, I have never been so miserable. The wall was covered in mold. The toilet was not working. And just to compare the visuals of the Innovation Center that the influencers visited to the factories portrayed in Amrani's documentary, you can see that the environments are the complete opposite of one another. The Innovation Center is polished, automated, and properly conditioned to battle the heat. The workers are sitting and the flow of the space seems productive and humane. The factories portrayed in the documentary, however, are dark, swamped with clothing, entirely human operated, and kept cool by simple fans. Further, a report done by Public Eye found that some of the supply factories used by Shein also allegedly lack safety protocol. In the discussion, the researcher reports that she didn't see a single emergency exit, and that the entrances and stairs don't allow workers to leave the premises quickly. Moreover, the windows on the upper floor are barred. I don't want to think about what would happen if a fire broke out there, she concludes. Just to be sure that this wasn't a rarity in Shein's supply chain, Amrani and her team went undercover in a second location. Girl, they found literally the same conditions. So, there you go. These are just 2 factories of thousands used by Shein to produce garments, but I don't think these accusations can be so easily written off. Timo Kalbrunner published a report that uncovered many of the same conditions Amrani found in her investigation. This report got so big that Shein responded and said that they would look into some of the accusations presented by Kalbrunner.
How do I get the information you got?
Can get it.
Why? Because anytime people go, I've done the research, they never say where.
It's everywhere.
No, that's not an answer. Where the is it, Mr. Bundy? I need to know.
They studied 700 of their own supply factories and found that 83% of them, or 581, required immediate action against unjust conditions. Did you hear me? 581. A moment of silence for that, because holy shit. All that we've discussed so far deals largely with human rights and workers' rights, but Shein is also accused of destroying the planet. Good On You rated Shein a 0 for environmental impact, stating, "From hazardous chemicals to carbon emissions to microplastics, Shein is making 0 efforts that we can see. It follows an unsustainable fast fashion model with quickly changing trends and regular new styles." Asda Rajvanshi wrote for Time, stating, "The company leaves about 6.3 million tons of carbon dioxide a year in its trail, a number that falls well below the 45% target to reduce global carbon emissions by 2030, which the UN has said is necessary for fashion companies to implement to help limit global warming." There have been innumerable accusations of Shein dipping its little hand into the cookie jar of copyrighted material owned by small brands. Like, every time you blink, they just got accused of 5 more infringements. Oh fuck, there's another 5! One of the biggest replies I've seen to all of this mountain of evidence is,
well, other fast fashion places do it too. It's not just Shein.
And despite the pitch shifter I just placed on my voice to sound slightly more annoying than usual, that's a very fair assessment. A lot of these companies are horrible. There's no way around it. Despite the fact that I don't shop from Shein and I don't get sponsored by Shein, I still own items from other companies accused of the same exact thing. I own an iPhone, I own a pair of Nike shoes. I think most people, especially those who consider themselves in tune with human rights, would say,
well, there's no such thing as ethical consumption under capitalism.
Especially when Amazon owns literally everything, which is obviously true to a degree, but it also can't explain every act of unethical consumption. Lena Norms has a very illuminating video about that whole phrase, which I incidentally found through Alice Capel and Kristen Leo, so thank you to those three. But I think particularly for me, it's not that it's super hard to steer clear of ethical violations, especially when it comes to consumerism. It's just that it's very convenient to participate in them, and I think that's why so many people do it. I can admit that I have cultivated a sense of entitlement over products, especially living in the United States where consumption is considered a hobby. And because I'm far removed from the creation process and the shipment process, I have the privilege of just swiping my card and watching as something magically appears on my doorstep. I'm none the wiser to the conditions this product was made in, who made it, or how much they were paid to do so. It goes back to Marx's theory of commodity fetishism that we talked about in my celebrity video. A lot of us have social relationships with our money, which in turn has its own relationship with products. It's never people-to-people contact, which makes exploitation much easier for us to digest. TLDR, Shein is not the only bad brand. I am barely a good person, and there are many nuances when it comes to consuming ethically under a system that is designed to exploit. However, I think the reason people focus so heavily on Shein is because it's producing these problems at a much larger scale than Zara or even Nike. Amrani stated in an interview that Shein outstrips all other fast fashion brands. It is the biggest fast fashion brand in the world. It has more Google searches than Nike, for example. And I think that the focus on Shein is because it is the biggest. It sets the tone. If it is engaging in really aggressive ways of making clothes and marketing to people, then other companies and other brands are going to feel like they need to compete with that by doing the same thing. For instance, a textile and apparel professor at the University of Delaware studied fast fashion brands across a 12-month period and took notes of how many items they were listing on their website across that span. Gap produced 12,000 different items on its website in a span of a year. H&M produced 25. Zara produced 35. Shein, however, produced 1.3 million. So what do we do about Shein? Or more accurately, as Bama Athreya asks, can fashion ever truly be fair? Well, no. Nothing can be done. We're all probably going to burn to death one of these days, and we'll all unfortunately have to do it knowing that Ron DeSantis roams the earth with us. See you in about 2 weeks with my next video. Bye. Love you. Can you just imagine if I ended the video like that, though? Unfortunately, I do have a few bullet points of bad news to share before we get to the hopeful stuff. The current conditions in which garment production operates seems bleak. And that's because it is. According to Athreya, this is by design. The ways in which supply chains are organized are intended to isolate individual elements of the chain from having too much power. Therefore, there is no easy, quick fix. And the options we do have can't be done on our own. Let's consider that illustrious statement from earlier. There is no ethical consumption under capitalism. This is now often used to mean there is nothing an individual can do to disrupt the whole, so why try? In her video on the subject, Lena Norms explains that the point of cleaning up your own consumption habits, so to speak, is not out of the belief that your individual actions will suddenly convince millions of corporations and CEOs of doing better. Individual choices are usually done for the self to align us with our own moral code and our own ethical code. From that same video, Lena presents something I'll call resource-based decision-making, which is doing the best you can with whatever resources you have, and that being the most ethical choice you can make.
We miss about the term ethical consumption under capitalism is that nobody knows how ethical your purchase is apart from you. It has an internal element that you can't just put on a chart or judge with a clipboard. On the other hand, if you're somebody experiencing period poverty and you need to buy the cheapest disposable tampons that your local savers can provide, I would still consider that an ethical purchase, or at least not an unethical one. Label on the product isn't the only thing that determines whether something is an ethical purchase or not, in my opinion. It's circumstantial, it's internal, it's what you know about yourself.
So, individual choices are important and can be very helpful, but we also have to mix it up a little bit. The reason that the fashion industry needs organized, collective pushback instead of just individual pushback is because it's largely reliant on systems of exploitation. And such ingrained systems make single actions of resistance harder to track. This industry exploitation is largely of women of color. Before the 1970s, garment production was usually kept within industrialized or so-called developed economies like the United States or the UK. In fact, around the 60s, the average family spent $4,000 a year on clothing and shoes, adjusted for inflation. Of course. Of that budget, 95% of the items were manufactured in the United States. But around the 1970s, this began to change. I know everyone hates the C word here, but capitalism played a large role in how, why, and where garment production happened. Corporations like JCPenney and The Gap began outsourcing their production overseas. They would create quicker turnaround for less money. This shift in production was often espoused as a feminist treat because it meant that more jobs were being created for women in lower wage countries. But as Athrea points out, the system intentionally created an undeveloped class of Black and brown women workers worldwide, especially considering 2/3 of garment workers are women and most are women of color. As you can probably tell by the information in this video, there is nothing feminist or humanist happening in certain supply chains. While the industry remains highly dominated by men as corporate executives, financiers, factory owners, designers, and promoters, it can't run without women. Women plant and harvest cotton. Women sew the garments in apparel factories. Women sell clothes as retail workers. Women are the shoppers, particularly for low-cost, fast fashion, as they seek to clothe their families. Women are the models who are used to create fantasies around fashion, premised on sexualized images of women that are explicitly understood to be controlled by men. There are even aspects of racism and colonialism present in today's clothing production industry. The apparel sector's current geographic spread has much to do with its historical origins. Colonial expansion reorganized the production of cotton, textiles, and apparel, creating entrenched power dynamics between those who owned and controlled the means of production and those who produced. Cotton continues to be produced largely in former colonies. And hearing this again makes it harder for us to sympathize with the influencers who went on the brand trip with Shein. Despite their own marginalized identities and the ways in which they are underpaid in the Western sphere, their application of these facts to this specific conversation comes across as hypocritical. My first thought, if I were to be casting stones in a glass house, is what about your own marginalization is more important than the marginalized garment workers you're essentially erasing with this trip? You could argue that it's unfair to say that these influencers are causing harm by promoting this brand when this brand is the one who is lying outright, allegedly, about their working conditions. And you can say that these influencers aren't necessarily the ones who are erasing the garment workers who are being exploited. But I think I'm learning very, very quickly over the past year or so that marketing is very, very important. And these brands rely on their brand image, and that brand image, for the most part, is strengthened by consumers and strengthened by the influencers who promote them. So touring the Innovation Center and giving Shein a 5-star rating on their ethics, while simultaneously workers are fighting for their lives essentially in other factories used by Shein allegedly, it comes across as erasing those struggles. Try to wipe clean Shein slate. Shein is also doing a lot of brand image repairing as of late, and I think influencers doing this trip and writing glowing reviews about how clean and well conditioned, they're not even sweating. These sort of remarks make it easier for consumers to digest Shein's past allegations. And so that's essentially what I mean when I say that these influencers are erasing the livelihood and the conditions, the unjust conditions that other garment workers utilized by Shein allegedly are facing. If you as a marginalized influencer acknowledges the ways in which brands exploit, underpay, and ignore you, what about aligning with a company that is known to do that and worse to its workers mean to you? And trust me, I get it. For a really long time, I just took whatever I could without doing research into what brands I was working with because I needed the money. Recently, I decided I want to do the bare minimum when it comes to the responsibility of my platform and having sponsored content, because not only do I owe it to my own morals, but to my audience as well. So, how do we, both as individuals and collectives, fight back against the ills of the fashion industry? Historically, two options have been largely suggested: ethical consumption on a consumerist level, and consumer-wide boycotts on a larger level. In terms of advocating for workers' rights, Athrea argues that pleas to individual consumerism should be kept to a minimum. Consumer preferences in the sector are largely shaped by women, so we assumed that we could appeal to individual consumers to help ensure better conditions for women farmers and workers. Yet consumer preferences never translate into consumer power. Individual consumers entering stores and making purchases will not influence power dynamics. Instead, Athrea suggests joining movements and organizations aimed directly at workers' liberation. Movements like the Pay Up campaign or the Bangladesh Center for Worker Solidarity. This way, you're able to put pressure on corporations and bosses that exploit their workers, not from an individual level, but from an organized, more noticeably powerful level. That isn't to say that you shouldn't also make individual choices where you can, however. If you want to shop more sustainable, if you want to limit the amount of clothing you purchase at a time, if you want to make cleaner or the cleanest choices you can with your own resources, that never hurts. I was actually surprised to read so many articles that shied away from individual work, because the way I previously thought of it, individual work has to add up, right? Like, if everyone decided to stop shopping fast fashion completely overnight, wouldn't that have a better impact on the environment and workers' rights? No, apparently. Kalpona Akhtar, executive director of the Bangladesh Center for Worker Solidarity, does not think so, at least. In fact, she argues that boycotts negatively affect the movement. Boycotts put our jobs at risk. The last thing we want is brands to pull their orders out of Bangladesh. We need these jobs, but we need these jobs with dignity. We want this job with a decent wage, a safe working place, and with a union voice. So you consumers can purchase with responsibility, buy with responsibility, and make accountable to these brands to tell them to pay more attention to these workers, to pay full and fair compensation to workers. Ayana Winterstein wrote something similar for Labor Behind the Label, a nonprofit organization advocating for workers' rights. We urge people not to boycott the brands involved. Instead, put the workers at the center of the issue and ensure their rights are respected. In response to a boycott, brands may cut production or pull out of the factories. This would lead to the loss of jobs, garment workers struggling to feed their families, and being unable to send their children to school. We want brands to work with unions on the ground and to listen to the opinions of those who know the conditions best, the workers themselves. Brands need to commit to improving building safety, working conditions, and to ensure workers are being paid a living wage. As consumers, our role must be to push this change by asking relevant questions of the companies whose clothes we wear and by lobbying for change. At the end of the day, I'm not an expert on workers' rights and I can only go off of what I find on the internet. I really implore you to not just watch this video, but to also read research conducted by professionals and consider participating in local chapters of workers' movements. As for the 6 influencers who made those videos in support of Shein, I don't think we'll ever know exactly why they accepted the offer. Whether it be because of their own marginalization, the rat race mentality of the creator economy, or just plain ignorance. I'm not sure it matters. Media literacy is always extremely important, but taking care to research who we're aligning ourselves with is something I want to do more of, and I want to place a big importance on it as a creator. I know for a fact that I will stumble here and there doing it, but overall, I do think it's something that can't be neglected in this industry. I also think the story of the creators going on the brand trip is a much smaller caveat than the larger picture of corporate exploitation. The influencers in this case are more reachable. In our minds, they're more easy to hold accountable. Therefore, we tend to go a little hard in an attempt to do so. But at the center of it is the undeniable greed and abuse at the hands of corporations. And I don't think we should let that part of the story go untold. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please let me know how you felt about this video, from the influencer TikToks to the uncovered footage from the Shein supply chain. Does any of the information presented today make you, I guess, sort of second guess your own consumption habits, or are you just riding, girl? You're fine. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because apparently verbally saying it makes you do it more, and I will see you some other time on some other part of the internet being insufferable. Bye. I love you. Stay safe.